Hello and welcome to this video. This is chapter 6 of our course about how to fight e4 like Caruana. Let's have a look what we are dealing with in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the probably deepest in terms of move count chapter of the whole course, and we are starting already relatively late in the game. So we have the starting moves of the Petrov and now d4. In chapter 5 we have looked at knight e4 already, and this is the sequence that we have looked at. And now in this chapter we're dealing with everything that happens after white takes on d7, which is the main move. We've looked at queen e2 and some other continuations in chapter 5, but we'll check this and resulting lines in this chapter 6. What does white's play is all about here in this chapter? It's all about the knight on e4. Black's knight on e4, the Petrov knight, is an actively placed piece, and as the structure that black has is perfectly sound and the development is also fine, I mean, we are ready to play bishop d6 and castle kingside. The play is mostly about white trying to somehow prove that the knight on e4 is a liability. This is the same story also in the next two chapters, chapter 7 and 8, in the old main line, where white tries to do the same. So what white's play is mostly about is attacking the knight with moves like knight c3, or playing c4 and then knight c3 to pressurize this piece, trying to make it move again or get some other concession out of black. We will see that black actually holds his own quite nicely in this whole chapter. However, the lines are at times extremely deep and at times also extremely sharp. So be ready to look for, or be ready to now study some lines that go far beyond move 20. This chapter is a proof that studying openings can also mean studying endgames. We will look at rook endings, for example, in this opening course now here in chapter number 6. So let's look at some concrete continuations. Here on move 7, white's main move is, unsurprisingly, to castle kingside, a move that you basically cannot play without in the long run. There have been other tries, but they are at best unspectacular, let's say, or downright dangerous rather for white. So let's have a look at some of the alternatives. A very slowish move is knight d2, simply attacking the knight on e4 by placing the knight on d2. Here black has no problems whatsoever by simply taking on d2. Just take on d2 and this would equalize completely. If you want a bit of a more complex game, you can also play f5. There is nothing wrong about this. It is slightly weakening, but the e5 square is weakened. But something like queen f6 and castling long next is definitely possible. However, I need to mention one thing that is simply the reality in this line. There will be a multitude of lines coming up where you have a very hard time to avoid a draw, downright a draw or a drawish position. This is the nature of a very open tactical opening, where in some cases you have to play along if you are black. If white wants some draw, it's really difficult to avoid. So here f5 is a playable option to avoid a draw or avoid a very drawish position, but you won't have that option every single time in the coming lines. So here let's look at knight d2, which is the cleanest way to prove that knight d2 is not really challenging. White takes. And now it is important to not play symmetrically with bishop d6. This is a little bit imprecise, because now if you castle, and what else is there? There is queen h5, and we see one issue of this whole idea that white has there. Oftentimes If he's quicker there, there's a double attack going on. And here f5 is not particularly great for black. We will see a similar situation later where white has a doubled pawn on the c file, and this is fine. Here there is no weakness. What we have to do is, in this position, is to play queen e7 check. That is a very clean way to equalize. Now if white plays queen e2, we are simply taking, and this is quite clearly completely equal. Instead, white may also try to avoid the queen trade immediately with bishop e3, but here the move queen b4 check will equalize, because a pawn sacrifice is just not sound now. Yeah, something like king f1 or c3. So after queen d2, we will again have equalized. It shouldn't take on b2. That is a bit risky if white can castle immediately, but here this is quite clearly nothing at all. Yeah, something like that is just an equal position. So 7 knight d2 is extremely harmless. Similarly harmless is the other knight move, knight c3. Well, I have to say, it is not totally harmless. It's just harmless if white does not transpose. So we will take and play bishop d6. Now if white castles, we will castle, and then we will look at, then this is a position that we will examine later. Here we will also see the difference, by the way, between the position we looked at like a minute ago, where white did not have a double pawn and f5 needs to be played. Here black is fine because the double pawn is a sort of compensation for the slight strategic concession we make with f5. This is a line that usually happens after white castles first on move 7 and then knight c3. This is interesting to check, and we will do so quite shortly actually. If, however, here white does not castle, angling to transpose, and plays queen h5, we are again dealing with a fairly harmless try. Black checks, bishop e3, and now the simple move bishop to c6. We cover this pawn, and we have not yet castled, so we still have this option to castle queenside. If white tries to prevent that, with this we have queen d7, and this is completely equal. Yeah, now we can castle short, we can castle queenside, and here black is quite happy with the position. I think the double pawn is always something to play for in the long run. So knight c3 does have very little independent value. It is mostly transpositional if white castles on the ninth move. Okay, going back here, there is also the move queen to e2. This is a somewhat similar idea to queen e2 one move earlier. If we go back a little bit to chapter 5 of our course, there we have looked at queen e2. That was the classic game Karpov-Larsen. After taking on d7 and then queen e2, white similarly to that line tries to play on the e file, play with the idea f3. Here my suggestion is to play as we do against the queen e2 move one move earlier, play aggressively. You can play the move queen e7, simply trying to keep the pawn, but I think it is just strong to play bishop e7. If white plays I think some kind of substandard line in the Petrov, playing actively is a good recipe. Here this is such an option. Here queen e7 I think is just too lame. Now white probably will grab the pawn. If he does not, we will be totally fine after castling and just retreating the knight, yeah, because the queen is wrong on the e file in that case. Yeah? If you imagine castling rook e8, if white not takes the pawn, the queen will be misplaced. So he will very likely now grab the pawn. So take on e4, and now you can take on e4 immediately, or you can play knight c3. After the immediate capture, I suggest to play bishop to c6. The queen now has to move and should probably, or will probably, cover the g2 pawn. For example, queen g4. If you enjoyed the free video preview, make sure to go to chessable.com/fightlikecaruana to get the full course. The full course with the Move Trainer and video sync technology is an excellent way to learn all the ideas and strategies connected to this repertoire. These lines were essential in Caruana's fight to get the world title match, and they can be an essential part of your opening repertoire as well.